So how do we deal with that diabetes that's associated with having too much fat mass, obesity? This is part 6 in the series of videos on weight loss and diabesity. Again, diabesity may not be a word, but you get the point. We talked about the devastation associated with diabetes, the incredible amount of cost, both in terms of money, but especially in terms of human life. It leads to heart attack and stroke, the number one cause of death, the number one cause of disability. And there are other studies which would indicate that diabetes is actually the third leading cause of death. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because more damage on a population basis is being done by prediabetes. So how do we deal with that diabetes that's associated with having too much fat mass, obesity? There are a lot of ways to do it. A lot of them focus on macronutrients and focus on specific foods. I got a lot of grief for featuring potato mono diet once. A fellow named Ford 150 couldn't believe I did it. But look, again, Penn Jillette is a heck of a lot healthier, 100 pounds less. There's no question. Just ask him, read the book, read one of the articles, look at one of the videos. Now, sort of on the other end, there's another one looking with a major focus on macronutrients in the other direction, the carnivore diet. Both of these may sound really wacky, but both of them have gotten pretty good results. Now, why is that? Because it's not all macronutrients. Learning how to eat and maintain your health is very much an emotional issue as well. But let's get back to the macronutrients just a minute, because there's been a new focus just over the past, decade or so. We've gone back to something old. Back in London, 100 and something years ago, there was a fellow named William Banting. He basically started cutting carbs out of his diet, and he wrote up the first weight loss brochure, which made a huge hit. That's how science writer Gary Taubes starts his very big bestseller book, Why We Got Fat and What to Do About It. It starts to focus on a thing that endocrinologists such as Robert Lustig and David Ludwig from Harvard talk about. They're both endocrinologists. They both run obesity units, and they both say, look, it's not just how much you eat. When you eat carbs, carbs stimulate insulin, and insulin shuts off fat burning. Now, here's another way of doing it. Before either of those guys were talking about this, there was a fellow named Roy Walford. He was the mentor of Valter Longo, who started the fasting mimicking diet. Valter Longo started that fasting mimicking diet because he knew from Dr. Walford the health benefits of caloric restriction. In other words, just not eating a whole lot each day. You take multitude of animals, nematodes, a lot of different lab animals, and you'll find you double their lifespan by feeding them less. Dr. Walford demonstrated that in the project where they built a huge aquarium out in the desert in Arizona. But here was Valter Longo's point, and I think most of us would agree. He spent too much time being hangry. He was just hungry and angry. So he's looking for a better way to do that. Now let's get back. I've had, as the population in our practice has changed to mostly YouTubers, over half of them now come in and say, look, I've already lost 30 pounds. A couple of weeks ago, a patient said, I lost 115 pounds. About a month ago, somebody said, yeah, I lost 95 pounds. How did you do that? Almost all of them are saying the same thing. Number one, I cut my carbs. And that is not a surprise, given what you hear from endocrinologists like Robert Lustig and David Ludwig. The next thing they say is, I sort of stabilized once I dropped my carbs, so then I began what they call intermittent fasting. Valter Longo and Sachin Panda would call that basically closing the eating window or the feeding window each day from what our current society's gotten used to with in the standard American diet, with starting to eat as early as 6 or 7 a.m. and eating till 10 o'clock at night, squeezing that window down and not eating except about 6 hours a day. And again, time after time after time, these people that have lost that kind of weight tell me that's exactly what they've done. Now, I've had a couple tell me that, no, I just did it. I went vegan. Well, not that many others tell me other things. Here's one of my problems: portion control. I've had a lot of success with going low carb. I've had a lot of success with closing that eating window. And I've added something that's not very popular. A few people will do it: prolonged water fasting. I do usually a 48-hour water fast each week. But I stabilized in the 150s, and then I started gaining weight again. You know, it was interesting. I was going from 21 meals per week down to, and at first I kept my weight down, but I just started realizing I could and in some ways should eat more. But then I kept eating more and more and more. And I started gaining weight again. I gained 10 pounds back, and then back up to 162. So actually, I've dropped a few pounds from that. And what I did was I started working on portion control. And there's a lot of options out there, a lot of plans. I'm actually using one now and offering it. This is some obesity research that was done using this plan. It was a meal replacement plan. 1 lean protein and 1 vegetable meal daily, physical activity, behavior change, which is a big deal, and continue and or adjust your medications as appropriate. And here's the kind of successes that you see. A BMI from 37 down to 27, fasting blood sugar from 182 down to 108, 94. Triglycerides from 144 down to 51, and blood pressure from 138 down to 72. People are getting off their blood pressure medications, losing all of their signs and symptoms of whatever symptoms they might have, but mostly losing signs, laboratory biomarkers of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance by losing a lot of weight. Getting their triglyceride over HDL ratio back in line. Like this Tom, for example, went from 152 over 49 down to 43 over 65. Big improvement in triglycerides over HDL. And again, big weight loss, as you can tell. So, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for your interest. A lot of people think I've always been thin. I'm actually 30 to 35 pounds below my peak weight. I've had to use caloric restriction, plant-based, low carb, intermittent fasting, prolonged water fasting, and I'm still starting to creep back up. So my most recent activity is doing some portion control. If you have similar problems and you'd like to participate, please let me know. Thanks for your interest.